Welcome to my thoughts on Metroid Prime. If you didn't know, Metroid Prime is a sub-series of Metroid games primarily developed by Retro Studios. These were the series' first steps into a full 3D experience, and I gotta say, damn. I've been following Metroid for a bit, circling around it like I did Resident Evil, watching but never really diving in. Like Resident Evil, I did have a smidge of experience, having seen a little bit of gameplay firsthand of the original Metroid, and brief moments of playing Samus in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. It's perhaps fate that the cool-looking woman in armor would spark a train of thought that lasted over a decade to this point, because the series always just interested me. But a specific category interested me the most: Metroid Prime. Initially, it was probably due to the 3D nature. I'm not usually one for 2D side-scrollers, so while the stories of Fusion or Super Metroid were interesting to me, Prime would always keep my attention throughout the years. Then, it was the music. Metroid Prime collectively has some of the coolest music I've heard in gaming. It's all over the background of this video. Finally, the story. Metroid Prime is known for packing details into its environments, whether through visuals or data logs that expand the world around you. That leads me to now. You may have seen the thumbnail, how it's not from Prime 1, and you may know my usual thoughts on methods, where I go one entry at a time. However, this isn't a video about each individual Prime game. Hell, I only played 1, 2, and 3. No, this video was made to talk about the main antagonistic focus of the original Prime trilogy. I'm not here to give my in-depth thoughts on Metroid Prime this series. I'm giving my thoughts on Metroid Prime the entity. That being said, I do want to give a brief review on the trilogy first, because I did enjoy these games, and I want to give them their fair share. Metroid Prime released in 2002 on my birthday? Damn, okay. Anyway, it was released on the GameCube. Despite having a GameCube, I never actually owned the game. To add to that, I lost the GameCube in the move to a different state. I also never owned the Metroid Prime Trilogy collection for the Wii, so that eliminated that avenue. I straight up did not play this game until January of 2026, nearly coinciding with the beginning of my rewatch of the Showa-era Godzilla movies. Truly a time to digest things that came out more than a decade ago. By this point, I'd already known the story, bosses, much of the lore, and the music, but while that makes my experience different from several others, it doesn't mean I expected everything. No, there were pirate data logs I hadn't read, experiences you can only get by playing the game, music changes you'd only really know the context of by hearing them change actively. More importantly, I was just excited to see how it came together. The title screen is amazing, largely thanks to that music. The soundtrack for the Prime games were composed largely by Kenji Yamamoto, who was assisted by Koichi Kiyuma for the first game, with Prime 3 later adding Minako Hamano and Masaru Tajima, and everyone involved did a fantastic job. The title and menu screen tracks for the first game are so damn good, I've even learned to whistle them. I've learned to whistle to a lot of Prime's music, actually. Anyway, the gameplay took some getting used to. Not only was I running this through an emulator, but the specific design itself was unfamiliar to me. As a result, my first run was disjointed and somewhat frustrating, echoing my first run of Half-Life. The difference was that I sort of expected that, so any frustrations from the learning curve were lessened. While I wasn't a fan of each area, their distinctiveness was extremely clear and became markers for whether I'd have fun for the next 5 minutes or not. Sorry to the Magmore fans, but besides the extremely marketable Triclops, I did not like the area. Despite this, uncovering the lore for each area was fun, from simple notes about how the pirate machines work, to Chozo prophecies detailing the corruption of Talon 4, and how they put all their faith in the vision of you, Samus, the warrior to be a hero. It was genuinely fascinating. I think my favorite area is the Phazon Mines, though that might also be Stockholm Syndrome from spending so much time there. It's a huge interconnected zone, in my opinion more so than the others. It's just full of lore, secrets, and enemies, including these new pirate troopers that have weaknesses to specific beam weapons. Is it weird that I find the power troopers the most difficult to deal with? Anyway, this area also includes the pirate experiments with the Great Poison, Phazon, and how they wanted to integrate it into their own forces. It's really cool and is a good penultimate main zone. At first, I wanted to scan everything, but that fell apart real quick as it was my first playthrough and I didn't know how to maneuver well. It's a shame, but my focus became survival over exploration. By the end of my first run, I only had about 72% items, even missing the Ice Beam's heavy attack. Not too bad, but it wasn't enough to get any special endings. Boss fights were interesting. I almost got killed by Thardus, but besides Flagra giving me my first deaths, nothing got me for a long while after that. Several tough battles, sure, but it wasn't until I got to the final boss, Metroid Prime, when I died again. That thing got hands. Well, claws, but the point is it's a pain in the ass. Even in the second phase, what ended up almost killing me were the Metroids that spawned. I wasn't aware you could just powerbomb them yet. Tough ass fight, but a sigh of relief when it finally went down. Going back to record the background footage for this video was nice, but it did let me know a couple things. One, sometimes the items feel more like a checklist or even a chore. I remember the Chozo artifacts in particular feeling kinda backtracky, and not in a good way. It also let me know that Prime 1 was definitely easier than Prime 2, and that the only reason I felt otherwise at first was because my ass did not know how to play the game. Overall, while I ended up finding Prime 1 my least favorite of the three, it's still good and I'd recommend it highly if you haven't played it already. Good music, great environmental storytelling, fun mechanics, good exploration if you're up for it, etc. When I first set out to finally play Metroid Prime after all these years, it's not the first game that enticed me the most. Not even Corruption, which featured an almost singular focus on the topic that interested me most, swayed me nearly as much as Echoes did. When I watched videos on Prime, for a while Echoes was seen as this odd middle child. Not really bad, just kinda glossed over. People talked about Dark Samus or the final boss, maybe a mention of Aether or the Luminoth conflict as a whole, but never too much detail. Of course, that could be chalked up to what videos I was looking for, but it took a while for me to see more in-depth talks about Prime 2. But even expecting Prime 2 to be tough, as that had been the prevailing sentiment, I was still really hyped. I thought the concepts at play, a planet being hit so hard by a corrupted meteorite that split between dimensions, a race of moth people fighting to save the light of their world while evil shape-shifting shadows threatened to replace them, and one lone bounty hunter answering a distress call only to end up saving the world, those were some of the most interesting things to me. And it did not disappoint. Echoes is my favorite of the trilogy for narrative alone, but it's also helped by its lore, environments, music, and tone. It's a much darker game, not only literally, but also due to its narrative focus. The environments of Aether, much like Talon 4, were corrupted, but unlike Talon, where Phazon corruption spread from the impact crater, Aether's meteor got pulled into another dimension after affecting the planetary light of Aether, and energy keeping it stable, thus creating Dark Aether. The war that followed, where the Aang would pull more of that light over their world, is what caused the destabilization and corruption of the planet. I absolutely love the way the game evolves these areas after each major boss, even if I do prefer the Aether areas at their weakest and the Dark Aether skies when they're bright purple. You know, at their strongest. Sorry, Luminoth, but overcast rainy Torvus is cooler. Speaking of, the rain in Sanctuary moves like circuitry, and I personally think that's awesome, even if physics cry in pain. I was actually a huge fan of the Dark World. I know that's kind of a hot take, but it's just beautiful. I like the weird hollow vibe of some of the areas, where you have perfectly replicated Luminoth structures between worlds, but the Space Pirate base is completely gone on the other side. Seeing the waters replaced with a toxic, Phazon-touched purple goop. Actually, everything here is touched with Phazon. The atmosphere, the ground, the ing, the entire dark world itself is the result of Phazon corruption touching the light of Aether and creating a new dimension. Phazon has helped create an echo of Aether. And that's not all it's done. A recurring boss, even being the final boss, is Dark Samus, the remnant of Metroid Prime after it took your Phazon suit with your DNA on it. Dark Samus is kind of this living suit trying to mimic the shape of you without really understanding you, at first. She's real weird looking, and her only goal is to consume Phazon, an annoyance to the pirates and the Ing. You fight her 3 times, and each fight is tense, with her matching several of your moves. For me, both her first fights are a toss-up if you're only moderately skilled. In my first run, while I didn't get wasted, I definitely took a beating. When I went back to record footage, the elevator fight left me with very low health. Dark Samus is fascinating to me, but I'll talk about that more later. The Ing are interesting enemies both visually and narratively, with their largest being the penultimate boss, the Emperor Ing. Phase 1 is a pain in the ass. Tentacles go way too high. With Phase 2, just kind of being a way to recover because of that. Phase 3 is fucking awesome. The music and gameplay synergize in that final phase, and it's so damn good. The guy wouldn't open its mouth sometimes, but genuinely, it's a cool fight. Though a lot of the bosses kinda aren't. By the time I got to Sanctuary, I got hit with 2 dull bosses in a row before Dark Samus finally woke me back up, only to encounter the Caretaker after. The Power Bomb Guardian was just kinda there, nothing special. The Spider Guardian made me legit rage quit before I got it the next day. It was a long night. After finding the final boss of Torvis, Chaika, not that interesting, it was just a stream of bosses that were just kinda meh. It's a shame since Amorbus raised the bar for me, and it took until Dark Samus 2 and Quadraxis to get me back into boss encounters. Though, I'll point this out. I missed a scan during the Jump Guardian. It's the only scan I missed, and I'm mad about it. Also, it and the Boost Guardian have the glowing Ing eyes above the model's eyes, and that bothers me. Also, I had to fight the Boost Guardian 3 times. I actually did well the first time, but I forgot to scan it, so I had to wait until the atmosphere killed me. Then, I died because I was careless. Then, I did it all the next time. I kinda like the fight, to be honest. I know, that's another hot take. The hunt for the keys was definitely veering into checklist territory again, but it never felt chore-like in my experience, unlike the Chozo artifacts from Prime 1. Maybe I just found some of the paths to getting them more interesting, or maybe it was my personal liking of the Dark Aether areas. I'm not sure. It's a shame this game came out in 2004, surrounded by Halo 2 and Half-Life 2. It's a really cool game, even if it's a third wheel in that car. Once more, highly recommend. Also props to both Metroid Prime 2 and Halo 2 for being low-key rushed as hell, but also being amazing. After getting through Prime 2, I took a short break. It had taken roughly 4 to 5 days to beat Prime 1 with breaks, took about a full week to beat Prime 2, had other things to focus on for a bit, and wanted to get it out of the way. On top of that, I wasn't exactly sure what my first impressions of 3 were now that I had gotten so close to it. On the one hand, I was really excited for all the Phazon stuff, and to finally face Dark Samus down myself one last time. However, from footage I had seen, I wasn't really excited to explore any of the worlds besides Phase. Few of the bosses stuck out to me, whereas even a majority of Prime 2's lesser bosses still had ink mutations to latch onto. Combine that with the overall connotation that Prime 3 was different from the others, and I was getting a little worried. Yeah, that worry died pretty quickly. The first hour was definitely a departure from what I was used to, but I wasn't against it. What worried me most was just making sure I got every scan I could. After getting 99% scans and 100% items first run on Echoes, I knew I had to lock in before something like the Ing web trap could lock me out again. Combined with some tracks on Norian, it definitely made the experience tense, even if maybe not in the way intended. After Norian, though, Corruption split the Metroid formula between several worlds, each with their own interesting segments to explore. I was least excited to explore Brio, but it ended up being kinda interesting besides the amount of bug scans. It was a resolution issue that I had to work around. Furthermore, with each world comes their own version of the Chozo, or pirate logs, reading up about how the people of Brio had screwed their world up so entirely that all that remained were crazed warmongering tribesmen, and seeing the remnants of their tech and magic-based golems littered around the region were pretty cool. I especially like the ones that you move around by turning into a morph ball. I like those golems. They're funny. Phazon Corruption definitely didn't help the place, with one of their golems being chosen as the Seed's guardian. Mojinar and his goofy shoes and walls can die in a fire. I hate that thing. Everything else was cool though. Everyone knows Rundus' theme. It was definitely a different experience in game, even if the fight itself was kinda easy. I spent a lot of time in the next area, Skytown, to the point where I'm convinced most of the budget went there. I was feeling the bosses even less this time, but I was enjoying the exploration. Normally I'm not a fan of steampunk or industrial areas, but there are times where I vibe with it. The movie 9 is an example of this. Elysia became another. It's a really cool location with a lot of different gameplay mechanics at play. The GFS Valhalla was a really interesting place, seeing the extent of Phazon corruption with all these mutant creatures and blue puddles. The damn liquid can be sentient. Like, what the fuck? That's weird. Cool. The pirate homeworld had its Phazon-carrying Leviathan seed implanted before the attacks on Norian, Brio, and Elysia, so it was significantly more corrupted. That being said, you never really saw that too much, with the focus largely on the overwhelming pirate industrial technology. It's neat seeing how they go about their day, studying the Metroids, dissecting them, and other living things. Rest in peace, that Darkling Metroid. Hope there's one more Ing out there still living. The defense turrets are living things, for God's sake. Like, what the hell? It's a fascinating place, truly. But nothing is as fascinating to me as Phase. The most linear destination, but still. With Phazon having been a decades-long obsession growing exponentially as I carried through the games, finally experiencing Phase made me feel like one of those corrupted pirates. It's a shame the section is so short, but I understand why, and it's probably for the best that it was. Being in permanent hyper mode made things very easy. That's something to note. Prime 3 is much easier generally than its predecessors in my opinion. I tried to use hyper mode sparingly, but even without it, it wasn't really that difficult. Most of my deaths came from trying to learn mechanics. I think I had less deaths in this game than any other. I don't think it's necessarily a negative aspect, it's just something I noticed. Boss fights kicked in big time towards the end. Gandreda's fight in the Pirate Homeworld, in particular, is a lot of fun and the music slaps. The Pirate Commander is a nice short encounter against a persistent antagonist. The fight against Omega Ridley is fun. The final bosses are great. There's just so much that went into the Dark Samus part of the fight that it kind of makes me sad she goes down so quickly. She has so many attacks I've never seen in any video I watched. Hell, the first time I fought her, when the cutscene played where she splits a clone of herself off, she split 2 off of her. I'm glad I replicated that in my recording because I needed people to see this. It's wild. Despite the easy factor of the final boss, the aura factor is high. I love the phase part of this game so much. Despite Echoes being my favorite, I have more of an urge to replay Prime 3. Don't really know why, but I guess it's a good thing. After I'd spent 3 days playing it, I ended up replaying the phase part like 3 times in 24 hours. That's how much fun I had with it, and I guess Prime 3 in general. Another solid entry amidst a sea of solid franchise entries, given it was 2007. Those are my thoughts on the games. I know that took a bit, but I did really want to talk about them before moving on to the main course. Without further ado, it's time I talk about what might actually be my favorite substance in all of sci-fi. Phazon. Phazon is a highly mutagenic, radioactive blue substance generated by Leviathan seeds grown from the planet Phase, a living world that is the source of all Phazon. Phazon has the traits of a superorganism, and will send out Leviathan seeds every once in a while to propagate itself. Yeah, it's a sentient blue goop capable of interstellar travel with the help of several similar biological organisms. What's funny is that it's not even presented that way at first. In Prime 1, it's just this weird interstellar substance that is poisoning Talon 4. It makes all the fauna aggressive, it makes the flora all weird and mutated, and also aggressive. It can turn rocks into living things. Thardus is a creature entirely made of rocks, made living by Phazon integration. The pirates have troubles integrating it with their own tech because it turns people crazy and can sometimes yield horrifying, debilitating mutations. Their elite pirate program, Project Helix, suffered immensely due to Phazon madness that caused hyper-aggressive states, as well as mutations and cellular degeneration, leading to their deaths. The Chozo calling it the Great Poison is so on point. Phazon even has this weird thing where certain entities become reliant on it. The Omega Pirate was one of the successes of Phazon integration, but still had a potential flaw in its over-reliance on the substance. It needed to absorb Phazon constantly. Then, there's its peculiar effects on Metroids. To start off, Metroids are bioengineered creations of the Chozo meant to eat parasites known as the X. The X parasites can latch onto anything even partially organic, take over it, and replicate it. Metroids start off as these gelatinous little orbs with teeth that latch onto prey and drain them of life energy. It's not even known what that energy really is scientifically, it's just that everything needs it to live. They're durable as shit and weak to ice, so imagine giving that Phazon. Increased aggression, mutations that sway them from their natural life cycle, and increased adaptability. Talon Metroids may be a little weaker than the standard breeds on SR388 or Zebes, but Phazon makes them highly dangerous, with there being no greater example than Metroid Prime itself. Metroid Prime is a Metroid. You wouldn't be able to tell by its first appearance, but it is. It's a hulking beast that is a source of all Phazon on Talon 4, resting within the impact crater of the Leviathan seed. Now, Prime 3 indicates that Leviathans are the source of Phazon corruption on a planet, so how did Metroid Prime become the source? Like, it's not theory, it's stated by the game itself, and the planet begins to heal after its death, as its death causes the Leviathan to explode, I guess. It causes the impact crater to explode. After everything, no matter which version of the game you played, the only possible conclusion I can come to is that a Metroid ended up eating the Leviathan seed's core, thus incorporating its traits into itself and becoming not the seed's guardian, but the seed itself. And that's not it. I implied there are other versions. That's because the original US GameCube release, the one I'd end up emulating, had the pirates find a strange, mutated Metroid in a cave, capture it, only for it to eventually break out, absorb more Phazon, absorb pirate technology, and then head for the crater, assuming it phased into it, thus bypassing the Chozo's barrier. That's sick as hell and explains why it has fucking missiles, and can even switch energy shields to block specific beam cannon fire. Just like the pirate troopers. The idea that this little gremlin of a Metroid was just fiending for Phazon and ended up becoming a living arsenal is insane. But that's not the canon version. As of the trilogy re-release and the remaster, Metroid Prime is implied to have always been in the impact crater. likely to not have to explain how it was captured and yet still ended up there. But both of these versions kind of lack something, you know? The former better explains the how, because Metroids aren't native to Talon 4, it can be assumed that this one just escaped, mutated on its own, then got recaptured, where it absorbed all the abilities needed to become the final boss, and the only questions being how it got there and how it got through the barrier. The latter, however, has it always there, which still leaves the question of how it got to Talon, but it doesn't even explain its arsenal. With Prime 3 having several Metroid Primes empty or possibly even deceased on phase, things are still left open-ended here. My best guess is what I said earlier, that one escaped pirate hands, mutated, absorbed weapons, and then phased into the crater to absorb the Leviathan. Otherwise, the idea is that a Metroid somehow found phase before Metroids as a species even existed and was brought to Talon alongside the Leviathan. Talon was hit decades before the events of the game. Metroids are more of a recent thing. The only way Metroid Prime could have always been inside the Leviathan is if there was some form of time travel. That's not even covering how Metroid Prime has a humanoid face with its scan and its armored form even having the outline of teeth. How in the hell did it get that? I know the Space Pirate's a fair game for prey items, but they don't have human-like faces. This thing is already raising a ton of questions, and I think that's awesome, actually. I haven't felt like this since Destiny 2 released Shadowkeep. Finding something just so cool yet strangely human, and that just takes root in my mind. It's fascinating. But that's just Prime 1. You already have radiation, mutations, rapid adaptation, insanity, cellular degeneration, and general poisoning. What does Prime 2 add? Dimensional tearing, shape-shifting, evolution, and possession. And it's all because of the Ing. As I said earlier, Dark Aether is a result of the Leviathan seed smashing into Aether. Aether was already an unstable planet kept alive through what the Luminoth called the Light of Aether, a planetary energy that sort of kept this wandering planet habitable. The Luminoth had learned to control it, but the impact divided it, the energy of Phazon seemingly having caused it to create an entirely new version of Aether, filled with Phazon and Phazon-evolved entities. As I said, everything in Dark Aether, including Dark Aether itself, is Phazon. What's interesting is that in Prime 3, you meet enemies called Phase-Ings. Despite a funny play on words, they resemble Inglets, the basic worker force Ing morphs. The implication there being one of these sentient puddles of Phazon hitched a ride onto a Leviathan, which then impacted Aether, and the creation of Dark Aether evolved the blue goo monster into a black and orange/purple goo monstrosity. Not just any monstrosity, the Emperor Ing. This thing started as one of these little things. I'm telling you, the implications of Phazon when you factor in the Ing are pure insanity. The Ing live in Phazon-touched air and can shapeshift into a billion different forms. Most of the life in Dark Aether is some form of Ing. Ing worms, Ing caches, Ing blade pods, all of these things are Ing. Inglet workers, warrior Ing, hunter Ing, these shapeshifting, phasing, sentient shadow goo puddles evolved into an organized warrior faction hell-bent on annihilating Aether, or rather replacing it with their own Dark Aether. And that's not all. The Ing can't exist in their base forms on Aether. Phazon is poisonous to things on Aether, but the lack of it, or perhaps the dimensional instability itself, makes Aether poisonous to things born in Dark Aether. So they emerge as this black, orange, and purple fog that seeks out targets before they fully succumb. When they find something, they overwhelm it, merging the Ing biomass with that of the victim, possessing it and turning it into a Darkling. These are creatures capable of walking between both worlds, and their mutations are wild. What's worse is that they can even possess, or merge, with machines. There's no evidence of there being any organic components inside quads or Ing smashers, but they can be taken over anyway. What's more interesting is that these machines grow organic components. Ing possession turns machines into cyborgs. They make bionicles, dude. Possession also turns non-insectoid entities into more chitinous beings. The Grenchler is a many-eyed reptilian beast that wanders around the Torvus region. When possessed, most of their eyes disappear or are replaced with tiny yellow ones scattered over their head and body. Their spikes become sharper, and their scales are replaced with patterned chitin. The armor on Space Pirate Commandos turns from metal to chitin as well. Insectoid enemies, such as the Splinters, seem to become lesser versions of the Ing themselves, with Dark Splinters being the only Darklings with the same form of energy eyes present in Warrior Ing. What's crazy about these possessions is that they can canonically be undone, or can have multiple Ing in one body. Quad robots have two Ing, one in the head, one in the body. As for being undone, though we haven't seen it, it happened during the war with the Luminoth. You're telling me you can reverse that fusion? That non-Metroid fusion? The Ing can also open portals and rework Luminoth technology, which is how they stole other parts of the Light of Aether. These things are supposedly maybe as smart as a highly intelligent shark, but I'm gonna be honest, they're making coordinated efforts on par with the Luminoth, and they're incredibly intelligent. What's weirdly funny is how Phazon mutations can still occur within the Ing. Feeding on Phazon within the Sky Temple is how the Emperor Ing turns into a spider for its final phase. Like, buddy, you're made of Phazon. How? There are still mutations and evolutions the Ing could go through? What's next, a damn Ing dragon? Would Dark Aether have become a weird shadow phase that spawned Dark Leviathans had the Ing succeeded? What's the limit here? Yeah, you heard me right, a shadow phase. In Prime 3, they confirmed that planets corrupted by Phazon are actively being terraformed to become sentient worlds akin to Phase, more planetary sources of Phazon. While you can maybe argue Prime 3 takes a step back from the wildcard factor of Phazon, it's still pretty damn insane. You get to see several instances of Phazon corruption throughout all of these worlds. Phazon clusters only weak to offensive uses of Phazon. Phazon roots that come up from the ground. Phazon crystals made out of pure pools of liquid Phazon. Rapid mutations of common enemies such as shriek bats into weird swim-through-the-air centipede things. Metroids that can phase through walls. More developed Metroids that can hop around, no longer able to fly. Liquid pools of Phazon that are sentient and can spawn mites. Like, what even is this thing? All the random, wild effects of Phazon from Prime 1 coming to Prime 3 at such a rate that it's almost too much to take in all the way. Oh, but don't worry. The Space Pirates and the Galactic Federation have new technology to control Phazon. They have Hyper Mode, the use of Phazon energy sources to increase personal defensive durability and offensive power, turning your average plasma bolt into something that could probably burn through the crust of a planet. The Federation, in particular, has created the PED, or Phazon Enhancement Device. This tech is capable of taking an external Phazon supply, using it to empower the suit of a Federation trooper. That's cool, right? There are no known side effects to this. Ignore that twitching arm. With Phase being destroyed at the end of Prime 3, I think Samus saved the galaxy from a bit more than Dark Samus' own plot. The Federation was just waiting for mass Phazon corruption from within their own army. Oh yeah, here's the fun thing. The entire plot of Prime 3 is that Dark Samus used a Federation Aurora unit, basically an organic supercomputer, to integrate with Phase and force it to mass generate Leviathan seeds to then hit multiple targets at once. Not only can Phase just do that, but its mind was merged with the corrupted Aurora Unit 212, who is then merged with Dark Samus. All of this is just possible through Phazon. Not even covering the fact that bringing more Metroids to Phase meant several more Metroid Primes could be produced. You know what I said about it earlier, but in a couple minutes that's going to become way worse and way weirder. Let's talk about corruption. Early into Prime 3, Dark Samus hits Samus and 3 other bounty hunters with a concentrated dose of Phazon that leads to all of them being slowly infected by the substance. The other bounty hunters lose their sanity and become complete slaves to Dark Samus, who also absorbs powers from them when they die. Like, she just spawns in some shadow form when they go out. This strain of Phazon is directly connected to her, not just general Phazon. Like, I'd say it probably is a more direct version of what the Space Pirates got, and they're completely loyal to her in Prime 3. With Samus, however, it affects her weirdly. It doesn't just infect her, it messes with her suit and can reach a state of terminal corruption if there's enough Phazon exposure. This leads to her becoming another Dark Samus. How? Well, I guess it's about time we get into that. Time to move on to what I think is one of my favorite genetic abominations in sci-fi. Dark Samus. the hell do I even begin? Take everything I said about Metroid Prime. Alright, now factor every single one of those adaptive traits and apply it to a form based off of one of Samus' suits. Dark Samus is your mirror who goes to Aether to eat its Phazon supply, killing several Ing and pirates, sometimes at the same time, in the process. When she first appears, as I mentioned, she's sort of like a living suit. She has the rough shape of a suit, your Phazon suit from Prime 1, but fleshy. She has eyes on her knees, thighs, and hand. She has visible toes, jets that are built into the spine. Her gun arm is literally the arm, not a hand inside the gun. Underneath the suit is a basic skeleton with the same vibrant colors of the Metroid Prime essence, and it shows that that is just a gun arm. Her skeleton is barely human, but it's taking on some of its features. During this stage, she's erratic. Even the pirates note that she's acting strange when they first thought she was Samus. Her singular compulsion was to absorb Phazon, only acting otherwise when blocked or when encountering other Metroids where she frees them. Her singular consistent foe is Samus, where you can really see how fast she actually is. She dodges, moving faster than you can. She hovers, just flying through the air and using herself as a missile sometimes. She can morph ball somehow. Like, she's extremely capable and highly adaptive even in this stage. She laughs all the time and generally seems unstable, yet she's still capable of figuring out complex escape routes and manipulating environmental Phazon. Not only this, but she survives full-on explosive death as blue particles, reforming later down the line like nothing ever happened. She even dies in Dark Aether moments before its total dimensional annihilation, but then just reforms later on in the regular dimension. Like, bruh, how? In the Pirate Warship Colossus, she reforms from Phazon canisters, eating the entire supply and changing in the process. I guess she must have absorbed enough Phazon, because from that point on, she's not looking to consume it, but to spread it. She uses Phazon to corrupt the minds of the crew, finds Phase, then sends a Leviathan to the pirate world of Urtragus to corrupt that world. She takes over most of, if not all, of the entire Space Pirate army and coordinates their efforts against the entire galaxy to infect it with Phazon. Not only is this form of her significantly more powerful, it is significantly more intelligent. It is insane how much power she has over Phazon and her tactics while using it. She organizes the Space Pirates, she pushes to, finds Phase, again repeating this, thinks to control it with a Galactic Federation Aurora unit, and then does. She takes over a sentient planet and pushes it towards a goal of making copies of it. She successfully corrupts several bounty hunters, completely taking over 3 of them. She has total control over Phazon. It is wild. Her new form is also much closer to a suit in appearance, rather than a living thing in the shape of one. This is where the terminal corruption thing that I mentioned earlier comes back into play, because it's kind of strange how Samus' relationship with Dark Samus actually works. Samus is a mixture of human and Chozo DNA. Both of those came with the Phazon suit when Metroid Prime took it off of her. Metroid Prime is a Phazon-touched Metroid. Samus wasn't Metroid fused until Metroid Fusion, which takes place way after Prime 3. However, when fully corrupted, Samus visibly turns into another Dark Samus. This is not an accident, this is an intended effect. It's even in marketing for the game. Ultimately, the point of full terminal corruption is for Samus to become another Dark Samus. How is this? I'm not actually sure, there's no real answer to that. However, I would like to speculate. Throughout Prime 3, Samus's face becomes visibly affected by Phazon, making her skin take on a bluish hue as Phazon veins crawl over her skin. Her armor, which is legitimately an extension of her through some crazy-ass Chozo method, also visibly corrupts, becoming more blue and purple as time goes on. I legitimately believe that, at the very least, during terminal corruption, it is very believable that Samus can turn into a being almost like Dark Samus. Her armor turning into an even more organic shell and her body becoming visibly blue and veiny a final form of her earlier corruption states, though the similarity also says things about Dark Samus. On the record, I'm going to take Super Smash Bros. Ultimate into account here. In Ultimate, two major things are important. One is that her eyes can be seen in a victory screen, showing that they glow yellow, akin to her form in Prime 2, and probably even Metroid Prime in Prime 1. Second is that her gun can come apart, revealing a pure Phazon core. I believe that, like Prime 2, her right arm straight up is still the gun. But everything else, I imagine, isn't too distant from a terminally corrupted Samus. So, Dark Samus might be a blue, semi-translucent, transparent Samus with yellow eyes and a gun arm covered in an organic shell loosely resembling the power suit. While I don't think there's official art for Prime 3's final version of Dark Samus beneath the suit, and the organic components probably cause the X-ray visor to not account for anything inside of it, I think that the idea of her being more like Samus like she was at the end of Prime 2 to be a lot more fitting. It shows an evolution between stages. The genetic information of Dark Samus is genuinely fascinating to think about. How both Phazon and a Metroid combined could merge with human DNA and gradually form a human-shaped entity that, for all intents and purposes, is only partially human, like a mimic. That's the thing that entices me. Human, but not. Like, even if she took off the helmet and her facial silhouette was just like Samus, she wouldn't be. That's cool to me. I found out recently that a lot of my favorite entities in fiction have been genetic hybrids, starting from the alien in Alien to Edis in Gamera 3. Things are just strange and alien to think about biologically. Dark Samus is right up there with them, but has the added benefit of being much closer to human. Human-shaped alien lifeforms like this fascinate me. Not human with longer ears or bigger eyes, something completely other that happens to be human-shaped. That's interesting to me because it raises so many questions. Dark Samus is one of the weirdest biological nightmares to think about, and I love her for that. If I were crazier, I'd think the game knew this and thus had her throw abilities at me that I didn't even know she had from watching prior footage. This is a powerful antagonist that came dangerously close to taking over a significant part of the galaxy, partially without even trying thanks to the PED technology. If only there were more of her. Shit, maybe I am like one of those brainwashed pirates. After years of circling Metroid Prime, I'm happy to have finally played it all. Well, played the original trilogy. It's a fascinating set of worlds to explore and narratives for me to overanalyze, all of which with amazing music and concepts. Prime 1 is a great exploratory outing with cool boss fights, Prime 2 is an excellent narrative with crazy mechanics, Prime 3 is a grand conflict with cool set pieces. Each game, I think, is worthy of a top spot, with it all coming down to personal preference. I have a friend who prefers Prime 1, I've had people tell me Prime 3 is their favorite. As for me, I'm sticking with Prime 2. The focus of the sub-series, Phazon, is one of the most fascinating substances I have seen in sci-fi, and its capabilities make my neurons activate in speculation. Dark Samus is one of the most interesting entities I've seen from just a biological standpoint without even getting into power or presentation. This was an awesome experience. With that being said, those were my thoughts on Metroid Prime, both the original trilogy and the titular entity. If anyone wants updates on my content scheduling, there is none. Most of the Helldivers 2 videos are out, all that remains are cues that are in the files but haven't played to my knowledge, or a particular automaton combat intensity that seemingly played ages ago that I'll figure out a place for if nothing comes out of it by May. I don't know how Project Midnight is going to go, but the project that it'd leech off of is still going on in the background. I helped write/edit a project for my dear friend Atlix, whose channel I'll link below, that came out recently. If anyone knows Japanese and is a Mothra fan, please contact me. It is not that urgent, but I want to know the lyrics of a song. Finally, I'm writing a book. I don't know if I'll talk about that more here, but that's the reason why I'll be busy in the coming months. That's it. See ya.